That leads us to the always entertaining Todd's Odds with our friend Todd Fuhrman. It's brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Happy New Year, buddy. We're going to get to the playoff matchups in just a minute. But first, let's talk about that Deion Sanders tweet. So the Titans have the first overall pick, as I mentioned. They fire their GM. They say they're keeping their head coach, Brian Callahan. Right now, Shedeur Sanders, number 2 on FanDuel's list to be taken in the top 10 behind Miami's Cam Ward. But do you think now that the GM's out of the picture and Deion can comfortably run the Tennessee Titans if he wants to, that Shedeur Sanders is definitely heading to Tennessee?
I mean, Jay, you didn't deliver that tweet with enough emphasis. It wasn't just wow. It was wow, exclamation point, eye emoji. So clearly Deion means business with that post on social media. But you mentioned the quarterback conundrum, and there's no doubt the Tennessee Titans found a way to back into that number 1 overall pick. The Giants apparently didn't get the memo that they also need a quarterback, beating the Indianapolis Colts week 17. And New England, we knew they weren't going to draft a quarterback, but the draft capital that they gave up beating the Bills in the regular season finale, still a head scratcher. You mentioned Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. I think Ward probably is the guy that comes off the board earlier. And given the relationship that the Sanders family has with Tom Brady, maybe Shedeur to the Raiders isn't as outlandish as it may seem, even with the Raiders not picking, at least for now, until pick 6.
I want to talk about the Ravens and Steelers, Todd, because you know the Steelers have won 8 of the last 10 matchups between these two teams, and these two teams split the season series, and the Steelers were actually tied with the Ravens in the third quarter of that second game that Baltimore won. I guess my question is, why are the Ravens almost 10-point favorites against their AFC North rivals in this one?
You mentioned the series history, Jay, and there is a little bit of noise in those numbers. Lamar did play both games this season against the Steelers, but the majority of those games, Lamar was either being rested late in the season or out injured. So be careful what you read into some of those straight-up results. But the one thing we've seen from Mike Tomlin, when it comes to being an underdog against divisional foes, that's where he's been at his absolute best. 39-game sample size, 27 10-2 against the number. And this does boil down to the number, because you referenced the last meeting between these teams that was close until a Russell Wilson interception kind of created that final score margin. But the Steelers in that game close as a 6.5, 7-point underdog. Now they get George Pickens back. It doesn't appear that Zay Flowers is going to be out there for the Ravens. So I think the Steelers are extremely live. But if Pittsburgh is going to be successful in a game of this magnitude and break that long playoff drought that they've achieved under Mike Tomlin, they're going to need to turn this thing into a rock fight, and it's got to be the first team to 21 to get out of M&T Bank Stadium with a victory.
Todd, of the 6 games this wild card weekend, is there an upset that jumps out at you that you'd actually be willing to wager on?
You know, I would have said the Rams if we were having this discussion on Sunday night when numbers were first posted, but the Rams have taken some money and now are a 1-point favorite in some spots at last check at FanDuel, hovering right around a pick 'em. So I'll go to the Sunday Night Football affair, and I think even with a rookie quarterback, this is a Washington Commanders team that's going to be a difficult out for Tampa. I have some real concerns about this Buccaneers defensive backfield. And when you look at the matchup that's going to be most fascinating to watch on the offensive side, Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore has a history that goes back to Lattimore's time in New Orleans. He has kind of done a tremendous job bottling him up. And what we're seeing from Baker Mayfield is him struggle a bit more in the passing game without his most reliable weapon in the middle of the field being Cade Otton. So I think Washington poised to go down to the big sombrero and pull off the outright upset as a 3-point underdog.
No surprise that the two teams that won their conferences and earned first-round byes happen to be the two teams that are favorites to make the Super Bowl, the Lions and the Chiefs. At this point, Todd, who do you like to challenge those two teams?
When I look at Kansas City, I think the logical choice in the AFC would be the Baltimore Ravens. If Lamar can finally get through some of that playoff negligence, that playoff, monkey that's been on his back, if they're able to do that, the Ravens-Chiefs would make for a phenomenal AFC championship game, but I still think Kansas City peaking at the right time. The NFC, for me, appears to be a lot more wide open. I know the Lions secured the number 1 seed, and I'm not going to disparage winning 15 games in the regular season, but I still have reservations about this team defensively. And if I'm going further down the odds board, I'm willing to take a small flyer on the Rams. This is a team that won't be intimidated taking on the Lions. We know they played them in the season opener this year. They pushed the Lions last year, wild card weekend. So I'd look at the Rams as a little bit of a long shot if they're able to get through an NFC North team first in the Vikings before matching up in the divisional round with the Detroit Lions.
Okay, let's take a look at the overall odds to win the Super Bowl. And, of course, they're always powered by our friends at FanDuel as we head towards Super Wildcard Weekend. Todd, where are you putting your money?
Can I just eliminate teams, Jay? Can we eliminate the Texans, the Broncos, and the Steelers at the bottom? No, when I look at this board here, it's real tough to make a compelling case for anybody not named the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Detroit Lions. But I think if I had to back one team, it would be taking a small shot on the Los Angeles Rams at 35-1. Is that bet going to win all the time? Absolutely not. But if I'm trying to find value of the 14 teams vying for the Lombardi Trophy, the Rams would be the only team that really catches my eye right now before we head into Super Wildcard Weekend.
Yes, and Todd's going to talk to us next week as we get set to head into the divisional weekend. Todd, great to chat with you, my friend. We'll chat with you next week, okay?
Always a pleasure, my friend.
And don't forget, you can see our show following Ravens and Steelers this Saturday. That's right, right after the game. We'll be here to break down that AFC North battle